Okay, Assalamualaikum and good evening. So today I would like to present chapter 6 about international conflict. So let's start. Okay, chapter 6. Okay, so the introductions. We're gonna touch on main question, and we're gonna do on introduction, so we can see what is conflict, why conflict happen, so the level of conflicts in international relations. Okay, two main question. Introduction will be first, why do international actors come into conflict with each other? A lot of reason. Okay, maybe you can just look at the international system itself, the ideology itself. You know, if let's say the needs, the power, and the needs to imperialism. So conflict happen in different factor. Okay, so why do those conflicts sometimes lead to the violence and war? This is the two main question. Okay, so five main topics in this chapter will be the first. I'm going to touch on theory of about war, individual level, domestic, interstate, global. Second, will focus on conflict of interest. So focusing on the territorial dispute, control of government, economic conflict. The third will be the conflict of idea, ethnic conflict, religious, ideology, and then means of leverage. For example, we can look at war, terrorism, and the last will be the peaceful settlement conflict. So this is the question we will answer later. What is conflict, perspective, source type of conflict, actors, and also conflict sometimes going to violence and war. Clear definitions. Perceived difference in interest, view, and goal. Okay, so every person have their own interest. Every groups have their own interest. Every state have their own interest. So it views what kind of goal that they want. Okay, so conflict also oppose preference. For example, a belief that perceived good aspirations cannot be achieved because of other party. And also conflict can also be defined as a difference of perceived outcome. Example on issues, ambalat issues is a bargaining situation. For example, conflict occurs in the world, for example, war on terrorism, right? So each group then they actually have their own interest. For example, IRA, okay, Ireland Revolution Army in Europe, okay, in UK itself, they wanted to have their own independence on the North Island itself. Okay, so bear in mind, North Island is a part of Great Britain. So they feel that North Island is belong to the island itself. So that's why they form a group that they feel that they can express their feelings towards the separatist movement. So maybe on behalf of them, they feel that this idea will actually become a good thing, or will actually give them a support from international system to excluded them from Great Britain and return back to the island itself. Okay, so that's why in terms of conflict, it is a different perspective. It depends on others also. So the view of the conflict is multi-view. Okay, so maybe in our view we feel that this should not be in conflict, but yet in others people view this should be a conflict. For example, issue in Palestine and Israel, the prolonged conflict, that never ending process. So what actually they have a series of we can say as a dispute situation, but yet until now the conflict is there. For example, now international system say, why do Palestine wanted to protect their state, just give them to Israel? And then the other part is we feel that why Israel is too greedy, wanted all over the Palestinian state. So this is the issues. that actually related to the conflict itself. Okay, basically, international conflict is about perception. So there are two school of thought analyzing international conflict, which is idealism and realism. For example, as far as it is realist, talk about conflict all the time. Philosophy like Locke and Thomas Hobbes, in liberal perspective, they believe that international conflict can be solved, and realism say cannot. Okay, only realism say that international conflict can be solved by war. In terms of liberalism, they feel that international conflict can be solved by cooperations. Okay, this is Kenneth Walsh in wrote his book Man, State and War, 1959, says that they have four different level of conflict. First is individual level, second is domestic, third is interstate, and fourth is global level. So it could be ethnic, it could be religion, it could be anything that can create unhappiness and also disagreement. But the conflict will be the level of conflict will be this four stage. So this stage actually uh, this stage actually uh, uh, create create the conflict that happen in the world right now. Every conflict happen in the world right now. For example, question individual level. So this is individual level. So individual level conflict basis on the individual perspective itself. The based on realism. The use of war, violence, means of leverage in international system is a normal and also a rational decision made by leaders. So resolve around rational issues, and the second will be the conflict occurs because of diversions and so rationally. Okay, the third uh, the education of population determine whether conflict become violence. Okay, so it depends on the rational theory, the rational issue. Okay, next will be the domestic level. Domestic level, a bigger the area will be a domestic area. So, for example, attention to the pressure features of the state or society that makes them more or less prone to violence in resolving conflict. For example, in terms of Marxist, in Marxist theory, they have bourgeois and proletarian. The Marxists look as the greedy capitalists wanted to exploit the poor people. So it actually explodes that create the conflicts in in German at the time. Okay, for example, Western explosionist, ideological and also totalitarian nature of communist state. And domestic political factors shape a state outlook on war and peace. So political party, interest group, and also legislator play imperative role to actually create and also resolve the situation. So some society change in totally. For example, Japanese itself. When he is World War II, he used to be violence. Let a lot of war happen, and also he actually create war. But right now, the situation is different. You can see Japan mainly promote peace. In terms of, and also they encourage people, in terms of cooperation and all. So this is what we call domestic level. Okay, next would be the interstate level. So explain war in terms of power. When we come interstate level, state with state, bigger environment. So mainly external threats, okay, external influence, explain war in terms of power relation among major actors. For example, power transition theory holds that conflict generate massive war. When power is relatively equal, distribute, and also rising power is threatened to overtake, a declining hegemony happen. For example, you can see what happened in Cold War, you know. So they wanted to create balance of power, rising power, so it actually threatened most of the state. And the second will be the deterrence. So deterrence supposed to stop war by building powers and also threatening us. But theory of arms race shows this method is causing more war and not preventing it. But for me, I would say that the deterrence will be the nuclear power. For example, if you look at the nuclear power state, okay, Israel, Pakistan, India, North Korea, you know, China itself, American itself, Russia itself. So they have nuclear power. So it actually the deterrence to them. So they're avoiding war. For example, we can look at American itself. You know, American biggest enemy is North Korea until now. Still, a lot of press conference being held by the president of America accused North Korea and also wanted to say that they want to lead the war. But still, until now, the war didn't happen. So it feels that nuclear power is one source of deterrence toward the international system to avoiding wars. Okay, interstate level again. Next, current focus effect on democracy, government structure, trade, international organization, and related factors explaining the escalation. Settlement of militarization, interstate dispute. Okay, this is current focus. Okay, global level, worldwide. So several theory proposed. First is cycle. Long economic wave, end of hegemony US, mid 50 years or 100 years, you know. So who dominant economic, so what dominant the world, and also long-term change, for example, war, conflict due to development of information, international norm. War become obsolete as leverage in international conflict. Too powerful weapon can't be used, highly complex, and so interdependence. So previously, war was seen as a normal. Now it is disapproval. So just like slavery and also dueling used to be a normal practice, now it is obsolete. So but it is relatively there, still war, but shorter and less frequent but more destructive. So war may be absolute obsolete, but occurs with a great frequency. Okay, maybe you can see that in either of prolonged war, you know, prolonged war means that peperangan yang panjang. Okay, in future war there will not be a prolonged war, but most of them will be a short-term war or less frequent war. But yet the damage and also the disruptful is very huge because of the technology and also the high impact of creation of new bombs that will create a massive or also the mass destruction. So that will be the future war. Two major type of international conflict: tangible and intangible. Tangible, things that you cannot see, view on your eyes. Intangible, conflict of less tangible and tangible. Okay, you can know. Okay, tangible, source of conflict, territorial dispute. For example, Singapore, Philippines, spread the island issues. You know? So uh, material issues, you know, and borders issue, land issue, you know, Israel and Palestine, that territorial water dispute, SPS. This is what we call tangible. Okay, so a conflict of who control the national government, cause different government, different approaches. US, British had overrule powers to the Saddam, and also third economic conflict. Most preventive from the conflict is it fuel, coffee, war trade, you know, now happen. Mercantilism, you know, this is the theory in foreign policies. Expansions for economy, military industry, drug trafficking. This is what we call choose conflict of interest. Okay, so this is what we call conflict of idea ataupun kita panggil integral. Okay, so ethnic conflict. For example, most of difficult type of conflict, for example, ethnic conflict, okay, systematic dislike, hatred of one ethnic group to others. For example, uh, Hutu Tutsi, you know, in Rwanda, Ambon, you have conflict, Bosnia, Chechnya conflict. So this is what we call the ethnic conflict. So factor might be tangible, like territorial conflict. For example, Kurdish minority in Turkey, in Iran, Iraq, and also Syria. If you learn history, Kurdish will be the state that actually now is being orang kata apa, dihilangkan, okay, being disappeared from the map, world map, and it happened to the Kurdistan, okay, the Quds state. Causes of ethnic hostility, for example, historical extents, kinship feelings, ethnocentrism in groups or bias. Okay, conflict of idea, religious conflict. Religious conflict is a widely spread conflict, and the most orang kata conflict that easiest can happen. Okay, religious regarded as a core value system. It differ easy dissent and threaten others as unworthy or even inhuman. For example, issue Pakistan, India, Azerbaijan, Armenian, Bosnia, Albanian, and distinction between believer and also individual, terrorist attack being said linked to religious conflict. Okay, and also conflict of second will be the conflict of ideology that happened in Cold War, communism, capitalism. US hegemony versus global governance. Global governance will be the UN. So who is the hegemony right now? Who is actually conquer the world right now? Is it US actually? He is a unilateral state that actually conquer the world, or a United Nation that being used to conquer the world? So ideology and also the theory. So mean of leverage, a conflict settled in explicit or implicit ways. So acceptable does not mean that both parties are happy or fair. So war violence action taken in international conflict aim favorable terms implicitting violence as a negative leverage. So state often have alternative means of leverage better than war. Okay, this is conflict resolution. How to resolve conflict? You hear that a lot of conflict occur in the world. How? Okay, in international relations, they have two types. The first is war using military, and the second will be the peaceful settlement dispute. Okay, for example, treaty or ICJ, kan, International Court of Justice. So this is what we call peaceful consensus. What are mechanisms to use solve dispute conflict resolution? For example, aims of conflict resolution, for example, promote peace. Okay, every state promote peace. Every international state, for example, you have UN. We have UN, we have ASEAN, we have ARF that promote peace, that wanted to reduce tension between state to state. The second will be is promote a relationship. This is diplomacy, diplomatic ties, for example, bilateral, multilateral. So when they have engagement, the conflict or the tension will be more or less burden. The third will be the measures for development, focus on development. The research says that most of conflict happens in the poor state. So, for example, what ASEAN do right now, develop the poor state, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, to become more development, and also they can reduce much less conflict. Practice tolerance in harmony life and also avoiding war. Okay, this is UN peaceful settlement by UN. Okay, this is Article 13 UN Charter. So said that there are several methods of peaceful settlement used by UN. So we have 6. The first will be the negotiation. We negotiate. Okay. Second will doing the good office. Good office means that we give help. For example, like Malaysian give help to settle dispute between Philippines, MLF, and also the state government of Philippines. Okay, the third will be inquiry. Okay, inquiry means that so we try to settle it and try to find the best solutions. The fifth will be the consolidation, consolidation, maybe we can get consensus from the international body, so we can use the international regime to settle the dispute. For example, UN itself, okay, they have Security Council, so might use the Security Council to settle these issues. And the last would be the arbitration, which is bring that to international law, or ICJ, to settle the dispute. For example, issue Spratly Island, territorial dispute by Malaysia and Singapore, the Spratly, the White Rock. Okay, so this is what we call arbitration. So that's all for now. So we might continue for our next session on the next presentation. Okay. So thank you so much. We still have another 5 chapter to go. So maybe next week we're gonna touch 2 chapters straight, and then we go further lah. Maybe around week 12, week 11 or week 12 lah will be our last chapter. Okay. So thank you so much. Assalamualaikum.